The marks of the brushstroke are integral to the appeal of watercolour. The aim of a brushstroke is not only to describe things, but to allow the colour to shimmer and glow on the paper. Painting fast can actually enhance that because you have to make every brushstroke count. Let's see what these brushes can do. The beauty of the sable brush is that not only does it have a wide body, but it also comes to a fine point. So you can make brushstrokes of almost an infinite number of shapes. Let's paint these willow leaves with the brush. Look how it can make thin lines, fat lines, wiggly lines. We can make unusual shapes. We can twist and turn this brush to do almost anything. The tip and the body of the sable brush can also make more precise shapes, like these lamps. Watch the tip and the body as it delivers its load to the paper. First we turn it on its side, then we turn it in a different direction to get the different shapes. Now we're pressing down to get more paint from the body of the brush. Back to the tip for the little edges, and then staying with the tip as we come down for the bars. Again, light on the little decorative features, pressing down again for where the brushstroke needs to be heavier. And then we can take water off the brush and use the brush very lightly. Let's put a little more paint on the brush and do this with slightly stronger consistency for the other one, for the other lamp. Little blob here, just the tip of the brush, a little line pressing down. Do you see that the brush is capable of all sorts of shapes? All you have to do is apply a different amount of pressure or twist it in a different direction to get out of it the precise shape that you're looking for. It's a very versatile instrument. Fill the brush and then just use pressure to release the amount of paint you want. When you take water off the brush, either take it off on the side of the pot like this, or you can take it off on a rag. Basically, you are in control of making this brush deliver anything and everything that you want. Do you see? It's a really versatile instrument. It's always best to use the biggest brush you can manage. Obviously, if you've only got 10 minutes, the less brush strokes you make, the faster your painting will come together. The flat brush gives you the opportunity to make lovely broad strokes, but it too can make fine, narrow lines. Let's use the windows of this castle to show you what it can do. Load the flat brush in the same way that you would the round brush, right up to the ferrule, fill it with the paint. Preparation in the palette is everything. Only go to the paper when you're ready with your colour. And then bring the flat brush in, use it quite broadly. You're doing broad strokes, creating your shapes with the outside edges of the brush. See what lovely broad strokes this brush can make. And it can also make quite precise strokes. So let's say we wanted to bring out some of these bricks. We can also do that. So even this brush has the versatility that the round brush has. See that we can pick out the various indentations of the brick here. We're not limited just to the broad stroke. And we can turn it on its side to make narrower lines. Oh, the wind is blowing my pad. It's very hard to make narrow lines when the wind's blowing your pad. Just like the pointed brush, it has the facility to do both detail and broad washes. The other advantage of doing your large washes with a flat brush is that it's carrying less water, so it dries quicker. So you could go in with your stronger colour sooner because there's less water on the paper. So say, for example, we wanted to bring in the shadow underneath the edge of the window. Do you see this has dried quite quickly? We could come in here with the darkness behind the windows. And we can bring small details with the side of the brush, precise lines, narrow shadows. Basically, it's just as versatile as the round brush. There is also the rigger. This is a brush with a long, narrow head and will deliver fine, even line all the time. Let's take these railings in the window. The rigger is perfect where you want to guarantee a continual narrow line. Now you know how to use the brushes, I'm going to show you some techniques for painting quickly. Obviously, waiting for paint to dry takes time, so painting wet in wet would be much quicker. Wet in wet technique is the fastest technique for painting in watercolour. I'm going to use the reflections in the river to show you how to use this technique. The secret of wet in wet is to make sure that as you add colour into the wet washes, the subsequent colours are more concentrated than the first. So let's just give ourselves a swatch of the blue river. This changing sky, sometimes the river's blue, sometimes it's white, sometimes it's grey. And then just the edge of the riverbank. And you see already we're blending wet in wet, the edge of the river where those metal stanchions meet the water. And we can now go into this wet wash without having to wait for it to dry at all with much more dense colour. So I'm going to mix up a bit of permanent sap green and a bit of that burnt umber, get it nice and dark, and I want as little water on my brush as possible. I've used the flat brush because we know the flat brush carries less water. I'm even going to put a bit of the blue of the river colour in, the ultramarine blue, and then we can wash this into the wet wash. And if you think it's flooding too much, and look, we're getting a bit of lumps here, that's a bit too wet, so take moisture off your brush, pick up more dense colour. Sometimes you'll find you're using almost neat colour. Look at this, look how dry this is, because the water is already on the paper. Now look at that, now we get a nice crisp edge and it hardly runs at all because we're using the water that's in the first wash. And you can keep on adding into this wet wash. So long as it stays damp, you can keep on adding darker and darker, so we can get the edge of the riverbank here. We can even add in the shadows between these metal stanchions. And these are casting their own reflection in the water. The secret is in the subsequent washes being more concentrated paint than the ones preceding them. There will be instances when you don't want your colours to blend, but you haven't got time to wait for them to dry. For example, the stripes on this river cruiser, the blue and the brown next to each other, we don't want them to run together. We therefore leave tiny slivers of white paint between the two colours. We can call the technique wet beside wet. Let me show you how it's done. Cobalt blue looks perfect for that. Especially when you're painting quickly, there's going to be times when you just haven't got time to wait for a colour to dry. Leaving little slithers of white paper is an ideal way to handle this. It's a lovely chocolate brown, so a bit of burnt umber, a bit of burnt sienna into there. And we don't want the two colours to blend together, so make sure they're not too wet in the first place, but you just come literally very, very close. Very, very close. It won't matter if tiny bits pick up, but basically you're keeping the two areas separate. You see where they do meet, they spread, you can keep them just very close together. Tiny slithers of white paper left between the colour, and they actually can add sparkle to the painting. Ideally, you want to leave your slithers of light on the lit side of your subject. So say we were going to bring in the background behind the prow of this cruiser. Let's use a bit of blue into that to make it a bit darker. We would come in behind here, and by leaving our slither of light on the top and on the lit side, so the light is coming from this direction, so we leave the slither of light on that side and on the top side here, but where it's in shadow, let the colour come up to the blue, and the slither of light on the lit side, slither of light on the top side, and then obviously we can come right down the front of here because it's a white prow, so that we don't have a problem down there. We've actually got white stanchions and things on here, so this isn't the ideal subject for this, but you get my meaning. Actually, this is rather fun to paint, getting a bit carried away here. Okay, on to the next technique. With only 10 minutes to paint, you won't always have time to paint surface texture. But with the dry brush technique, you can create lots of little marks with one brush stroke. Let's use the sparkle on this water to show you how it's done. It's actually not dry paint, so that in a way the name is slightly a misnomer. You have to load your brush with paint still, and it's not very runny, but not very dry either. You can see it's not running down into the trough here. Load the brush, because you're actually going to be painting almost with the side of the brush and with the hairs of the brush. Rather than bringing it to a tip like you normally would, press it down so you can spread the hairs apart, and then take it to the paper and literally graze across the top of the paper, literally touching the tops rather than the troughs of the paper, and creating a lovely texture on the paper. Perfect for sparkly water, maybe the texture of the castle. Turn it sideways to get a bit less. And if you want to thicken up, you just press a little bit harder and it will run together.
Now available to buy. Try these techniques at home whenever you wish. The extended DVD of today's workshop and the book that accompanies this series are now available from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.